Welcome to this new MOOC video. Today we will discuss a couple of important topics. The first one is to help you differentiate project, structure, corporate finance and public finance. This will allow you to better understand what ultimately project finance is. Then, after having spoken about that, we will tell you more about the condition of success of project finance, the key consideration a project finance player weighs when he wants to launch a project with partners. We will also give you a sense between social and economic infrastructure and how we differentiate these two important types of infrastructure. Infrastructure is providing to the population essential needs. In the developing countries, these needs have never ceased to grow. In developed countries, these needs are now renewed and new forms of infrastructure start to emerge, specifically in the green economy. All over the world, this infrastructure needs to be financed. But the question is, how do we finance infrastructure? Let's start to contrast project finance with other forms of finance you know and you are familiar with. First is corporate finance. Corporate finance is about financing the needs of the corporate entity on its own balance sheet, with its own resources. Needs could be related to capital expenditures, operations, organic growth, business combination, but ultimately these needs would need to be financed through a combination of internal and external resources. Internal resources are quite naturally linked to the capacity of the company to generate profit on a regular basis. By contrast, the use of external resources like bonds, loans, new rights issue, increase in the capital of the company are externally generated resources. But ultimately, the financing of these corporate needs will be repaid through the capacity of this company to generate cash and use this pool of cash at its disposal to repay the bonds, to repay the loan, and hopefully to get a decent dividend and return to its shareholders. Let's talk now about structure finance. By contrast to corporate finance, these investment projects are done outside of the balance sheet of the company for the purpose of using the leverage that is the primary benefit of using off-balance sheet financing. The company, should it decide to finance each and every project on its balance sheet, would face in one way or another a problem, not only because the project would not be able to be financed through the markets, but its internally generated resources would not probably allow the company to do it on a regular basis. By using an off-balance sheet structure, the company can benefit from the leverage associated with such off-balance sheet financing and share the risk and reward with other parties. What are the forms of structured finance you know and you already heard of? The first is securitization. It's a process through which we isolate assets from the company to fund those assets on a separate, isolated, bankruptcy-remote basis. We call it asset-backed finance. The second form of structured finance is leverage buyout. It's a technique by which an acquirer decides to finance its acquisition through a leveraged finance. And the primary technique used here is to simply separate, through the creation of a holding company, separate the finance or the financing of such an acquisition from the operational side. The third form of structured finance is precisely the topic of this MOOC. It's project finance, which we also know as infrastructure finance. It's a technique by which a company, take Bouygues, Eiffage, for example, decides to partner with others, usually an operator and a financier, to compete and to finance, to compete for financing, by the way, the design, the building, the operation, the maintenance of an infrastructure project for a term which could be 15, 20, 25 years, even 30 years. The last of the techniques of structure finance is leases. Lease, operational lease or financial lease, is a technique aimed at funding a capital expenditure or a capital outlay outside of the balance sheet of the corporate and to dissociate ownership of this asset from operation and use of these assets. By contrast to the other form, we will call it asset-based finance.